But welcome, everybody. You have a packet in front of you on the table. I'd like to ask everybody to take your pen and write your name on that packet. We have 60 plus identical packets, so that will help you to keep track of it. And if anybody leaves it here, we'll know who to give it to. So go ahead, write your name on the packet. The schedule for today, here's what it looks like. So we're going to have 4 sessions. So they'll go for about an hour and 10 minutes. We'll take a 10-minute break, hour and 10 minutes, 10-minute break. So we'll keep doing that. And then at the end, there'll be some time for questions and answers. When we gather together like this, we're really following the example of the early church. Acts 2:42 says, "And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers." At CIV, we have 4 places to go, and that you go to those places to grow. It's attending a worship service, serving on a team, connecting in a group and an event, and then plugging into a learning environment. And it's at these learning environments that we really devote ourselves more to the apostles' teaching that I was talking about in Acts 2. And these are really an opportunity for us to learn from the wisdom that God has allowed there to be in our church. Hebrews 13:7 says, "Remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith." God has given Nathan Lewis real wisdom in the area of marriage, other areas of life as well, but we're talking about marriage today, and he's a part of our church. We are blessed to be able to consider the outcome of he and Tina's marriage. We get to see it. They really do love each other, and so it's not like we're just reading some book or listening to some podcast where we don't know anything about that person's marriage. These people are a part of our church, and we get to consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from Nathan this afternoon. I'm going to pray, and then Nathan's going to carry us forward after that. God, we thank you so much just for how you love us and how you want us to experience life the way that you intended it to be. I pray that you'd speak to each of us this afternoon. Help us to learn what it is that you want us to learn, to be able to put it into practice in our marriages. And I just pray that you'd just give us real focus this afternoon as we hear what Nathan has for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks, Thad, for the introduction. Very honoring introduction. Actually, I have nothing to add to that introduction. Any questions? We will have a time for question and answer at the end, but I also may at some point ask you, I may stop and just entertain questions throughout. But just by way of introduction here, a couple of thoughts. One, marriage consists of thousands of exchanges of communication per day, and every one of those are emotionally charged. Now, by emotionally charged, I don't mean that negatively charged necessarily, but they're not free of emotions at all. I mean, emotions are always just right under the surface, ready to come out. And there's always emotions involved in any communication. And we're not just talking about verbal communication. We're talking about nonverbal communication. We're talking about all kinds of other things with regard to communication. And no one can elicit strong emotions and strong emotional responses from you like your spouse can. I can push Tina's buttons. She can push my buttons like nobody else can. That is the nature of marriage, which means you're normal. My goal today, though, is to give you some practical suggestions on how to get control of your emotions, particularly in the midst of conflict. We don't have time today to cover everything that you need to know about emotions. That would take a very long time, much more time than we have today. But what I want you to walk away with is some handles for mastering emotions, particularly in the heat of the moment, if you will. I can get ramped up pretty quickly. I have a temper, and I can go from 0 to 120 in seconds emotionally. And sometimes I am well on my way, well down the road before I realize that I am just out of control emotionally. So Tina and I have, through a lot of counsel, through Scripture ourselves, and just 47 and a half years of marriage, we have figured some things out. So what I'm going to end up sharing with you is exactly what we do. Specific steps for mastering your emotions in the middle of conflict or an argument. So if nothing else, I hope you walk away with that today. Just some handles on how to do that. I'm going to do 3 things today. I'm going to talk about understanding marriage, or at least aspects of marriage that we need to understand in order to begin to master emotions or figure out how emotions fit into the marriage relationship. Second thing is understanding emotions and how emotions actually work. And then talk about those emotions in the context of marriage. So the first thing I want to say about marriage, there's 3 categories I'm going to talk about regarding marriage. One is that marriage is like 2 worlds colliding. Marital bliss can quickly turn into marital battles, and that's very normal. It's normal because of this. And this is a very short list of things that we bring into the marriage. And these things don't often show themselves or reveal themselves previous to marriage. Something about marriage that really brings these out, not the least of which is just living with each other day in and day out, and then trying to cooperate together to accomplish things that just aren't all that exciting. In fact, marriage, like everything else, like life, is made up a whole lot more of just the everyday mundane. There's nothing really thrilling about it. Dating can be really thrilling. And then when you make a commitment, the Bible calls it a covenant, you covenant to do life together for the rest of your life, and then you just get into doing it together, it's mundane. And it can easily become the same old every day. But we bring things into the marriage that is a history. We bring in personality. My wife is an extrovert. I am an extreme introvert. That alone creates very interesting situations. But there's a whole lot of other things. We're both more feelers, which means that when we're emotional, we play off of each other, and we make all kinds of assumptions emotionally and everything else. But there's other things, other aspects of our personalities. We bring in family and friends. We are trained by our families. And we mimic our families in all kinds of ways that we bring into marriage. My dad, and we joke about this now, but they got married in the 50s, And this was kind of like 50s culture, and my mom was a typical housewife. My mom's name was Leona. My dad is from Arkansas. So he pronounced her name Lona. Lona? Lona? And I grew up hearing, Lona? He's sitting on a couch or his easy chair. Lona, bring me a cup of coffee. And my mom's up, gets a cup of coffee. Just the way it was. Lona, get me this. Make me a sandwich. Lona. One of the things you do not hear in my house is, Tina, give me a cup of coffee. But I brought that into the marriage. Now, Tina also brought some things into the marriage, and from her parenting and the way so her mom was very much like my mom. Her understanding of her responsibility is that she basically maintains the household and serves her husband. And so we'd be sitting at the table, and if this is the table, my mother-in-law sitting here at the end, I'm sitting here next to her, Tina's sitting next to me here. And we're at their house. She makes this great meal, and she reaches across to Tina, looks around me and said, Tina, would Nathan like some more potatoes? Now, why is she doing that? Because she expects that Tina is going to take the exact same place in our marriage that she has taken in hers. And that's what a good wife does. Make sure that he is growing horizontally. So that became a source of conflict, and we finally talked about that, and we agreed that Tina's just going to, say something back to her kindly. So she did that. So it said, would Nathan like some more potatoes? And she said, well, I don't know. He's sitting right next to you. Why don't you ask him? And she reacted almost as if she wasn't hurt, she wasn't angry. She was just perplexed. It was almost like Tina just said, the world is flat. Or, we're not really here. Or I don't know, anything that's like, what are you talking about? What planet do you live on? Well, we bring those things into the marriage culture. Tina's raised in an Italian Catholic family who was they were very touchy-feely, affectionate, greetings with kisses on the lips and all that stuff. We did not do that. We did not in my family, okay? Different beliefs about all kinds of different things, political beliefs, not necessarily different, but we bring those into it, certain convictions that we have about all kinds of things, values, different values, what's more important than what values we have, and gender, male, female. And in case you don't know, those are very different. Very, very different. Different in how we communicate, different in how we're wired, different in all kinds of ways. Religion, we bring religious beliefs in and practices and all of that in. And expectations, we certainly bring expectations in. I expected Tina to do certain things, and she expected certain things of me. She expected me to actually get my clothes in the hamper instead of near the hamper, just to actually get them in. And I'm not making this up. That was a point of contention for us for a long time. My argument is the hamper moved, but that didn't fly. And all kinds of other expectations that are a whole lot more significant than that. Like, for example, she actually expected me to meet her needs. I did not come in with that goal. I did not come into the marriage with that goal. I had to actually learn that was part of my responsibility. So that was a point of contention for us for a long time. And attitudes, just certain attitudes about all kinds of things, commitments that we have. So we can go on. This is a short list. So I'm going to ask a rhetorical question here because it has an obvious answer. Which one of these has the potential for conflict? This is what I mean by two worlds colliding. And it's a challenge. Now, this is where emotions come in because emotions are involved in all of this and particularly involved in conflict. So I want us to have an understanding of marriage that I'm going to come back to when we talk about resolving or mastering emotions in the midst of conflict. But before we do that, I just want to take a little bit of time right now, just with yourself. You don't need to do this with your spouse, but just with yourself. Take a look at the list of things that are on there and choose a couple of things. Just circle a couple of things that you already know are emotionally charged that you brought into the marriage. Take a minute or so to do that. Okay, just by a show of hands, how many of you were able to come up with something? Raise your hands. Yeah, if you didn't, I'll be glad to help you figure that out. So that's what we're talking about here. So we're talking about marriage is like two worlds colliding. Now that's not all that it is. It's also two worlds merging. It's also becoming one. It's also negotiating through those things and creating something beyond that. But these are things that we often don't even think about. We're not intentional about. We don't lay it out until we have conflict. And then we realize, oh man, there's something going on here. We didn't just start off as a blank slate. We actually brought stuff into the marriage. And we have to work through that. So, two worlds colliding, and then it's three ships sailing. Three ships. Marriage is, first of all, a stewardship. It is a stewardship. We find this quote of Genesis that Jesus makes in Mark 10 here. He says, "But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Therefore, a man shall leave his mother and father and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate." So God is the one who established marriage, and he established it for several different reasons. But it is a stewardship, and the idea of stewardship is that it's a sphere of responsibility. It's a sphere of responsibility that is established by God, and because it's established by God, it is giving to us for a particular purpose, then we are accountable to God for doing that. And God also told us how to do it. He actually told us how to do it. I don't know if you've ever experienced where you're working somewhere or you're doing something for somebody else, and it wasn't quite clear what it is you're supposed to do, and then you find out you did it wrong. That's a lot the way marriage is. It's a whole lot like that. You don't find out what you should have done until you find out what you didn't do. And it's because of those things we bring into the marriage that are just lying under the surface there that we don't talk about. And conflict brings that out. At least it's the opportunity for that. But God didn't just tell us, do marriage, and then go to Chick-fil-A. Because God's at Chick-fil-A, right? That's what it's Christian, I don't know. Anyway. But he actually told us how to do it. This is the way to do it. So stewardship means that marriage is God's idea. It's to be done in his way and for his purposes. That's what it means. It is a stewardship. Now, what in the world does this have to do with emotions? because part of understanding, mastering our emotions is that emotions need to serve those purposes, not the other way around. Emotions cannot become the tail that wags the dog. And emotions are, we're going to talk more about what emotions are, but for now, that's the most important thing is this motivates us. Understanding that marriage is a stewardship motivates us to work to get past ourselves, to understand ourselves, each other, and our emotions that are involved, to keep at it for the sake of what God wants to accomplish with our marriage. Now, if I were in a classroom, I would stop right now and I would say, is this making sense? So I'm going to. Is this making sense? Really, are you guys tracking this right now? Because this is really important that you understand that. This is one of the most foundational things. Okay, marriage is a stewardship. The second ship is companionship. Marriage is companionship. So it's not just, okay, God brings us together and then tells us, like it or not, whatever you do, this is what I want you to accomplish, and just grin and bear it. No matter how you feel, no matter what you experience in marriage, just do it because I told you to do it and do it. That's not what marriage is. Some people have the attitude that as long as we don't get divorced, as long as we just tough it out and stay together, everything's good. God's good with that. But actually, that's not true. That is the bottom line. Long-term commitment is the bottom line, but it's not the ideal. It's not what we strive for. I've shared this in other seminars, but marriage is giving two people coming together, giving birth to a third entity called the marriage. And when it first begins, a baby is born and it has to be nurtured. And it's nurtured by feeding it with the right things and growing it. The biblical term for that is build up, to strengthen, to grow, to nurture, to mature is another word for that. God never intended for us to be alone. That's part of what we were created for. Then the Lord God said, this is in Genesis at the very beginning, before Adam and Eve sinned. God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. That's a pretty significant and powerful statement. It's not good for man to be alone. Mankind there, by the way, it's not good. God's understanding or God's intent in creating us was not to create us as individuals. That's not what reflects his nature because he is three persons perfectly united. So I will make him a helper fit for him. The word fit there and helper, those two words there, are an equal companion that completes a whole. So the phrase better half really is biblical. It's true. It's theologically correct. It's biblically correct. Or the statement, you complete me. It's actually really true. That's true. And that's part of God's intent. But it's not just that. It's not just two halves making a whole, coming together. But it's intended to be enjoyed. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth. By the way, some of these scriptures up front here are not written down. I don't remember which ones are and which ones aren't. But let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth. That word rejoice is get excited about, be happy in, enjoy. Another verse says, enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life. So one of the things, vain means meaningless. So Ecclesiastes is one of those books that basically says life sucks and then you die, okay? But then it talks about things in the midst of life, though, that can really bring joy in life. And one of those things that brings joy is marriage. We're to enjoy it. And it gives some meaning to life. Now, we bring meaning to it. We don't get meaning from it, but as we bring meaning to it, and we do things God's way, He blesses us in the midst of that. So, basically, as a companionship, it's a mutual meeting of needs. Need for intimacy, and there's different kinds of intimacy. We're going to talk about emotional intimacy today, but physical intimacy, emotional, intellectual, recreational, spiritual, and social. Should be a comma there between recreation and spiritual. I don't know what recreational spiritual is. So two different. But in other words, an intimacy is about a closeness, a shared experience, I don't want to confuse this with emotions, but I have to use the word feeling. It's a feeling, more of a state of being close and known. And there's a sense of sharedness and a mutual enjoyment of it. All of that is wrapped up in this idea of intimacy. And then becoming one is growing together, maturing the marriage. That's the intent. The two shall become one. Not just one flesh, but that is also a metaphor for how the marriage is to grow and become one. The two individuals actually create and grow a third entity that is the marriage. And then we're to enjoy each other. That's what you read in the last scriptures. In every way that God intended us to do that. Now, marriage can be a slice of heaven on earth. It really can be. But only if we do it God's way. If we don't do things God's way, it can be hell on earth at times. It really can. God, out of His grace and His concern and His love for us, revealed to us how to make it a slice of heaven on earth. So that's part of what He wants for us. Then the third ship is it's a partnership. Partnership, looking at Malachi, that should be Malachi. That's not Mark. I don't remember what verse that is, but it's not Mark. Forget that. The verse is right. Malachi 3. Yeah. The verses are up there, huh? 14 through 15. Okay. So, God is saying this to the children of Israel. You ask why? Why is God upset? It is because the Lord is acting as a witness between you and the wife of your youth, because you have broken faith with her, though she is your partner, the wife of your marriage covenant. So she's your partner. Partner there means equal. And it is something that we are doing together to accomplish something that is beyond both of us. And we mutually benefit from it, but it's for purposes beyond ourselves. Has not the Lord made them one in flesh and spirit? They are His. And why one? Because He was seeking godly offspring. So one of the purposes that's beyond ourselves is our offspring. So guard yourself in your spirit and do not break faith with the wife of your youth. So a little bit about the impact or raising godly offspring. That's not just about each of us doing things in relationship to our kids and teaching them things that God that wants them to know. Not like sitting them down in a classroom and say, okay, now we're going to teach you about faith. It's actually godly offspring are raised in a culture. They're raised in an environment. And what sets the tone for that environment, including an emotional tone, is the marriage. That's what sets the tone. And that's what they experience. And that's part of their godliness or God orientation is what that means, is that as they experience husband and wife, the mother and father, loving one another and doing marriage God's way, that creates a culture, an environment that they benefit from and helps them take seriously the things that God says to them. So marriage as a partnership means that we are working with and for each other. One of the things that emotions do in marriage can do, that is, particularly negative emotions. Positive emotions can do this too, is drive a wedge between us where we stop working with and for each other and we start working against each other for our own purposes. And then we feed emotions, feed that, and then that feeds certain emotions. So we're moving together in the same direction, shared values and purposes. And we are assigned roles in this. A lot of the emotional conflict that we have is over these assigned roles, leader and follower. I'll say this now because I'll talk about it more later. But leader and follower doesn't mean that one person is barking orders that the other one has to unquestioningly obey. That's not what that's about. It is about us. It's about leaders, husbands taking responsibility for doing what is right and leading the family out in that. And the wife willingly cooperating with that. But they are equal before the Lord. In fact, in Ephesians 5, where it talks about her submitting to him and his leading, you also find them submitting to one another. There's a mutual submission there. But they do have to fulfill those roles in order for it to work God's way. And we'll come back to that later. Equal worth. One is not better than, more important than, nor more deserving than the other. One of the things that this has to do with emotions in the marriage relationship is when we begin to abuse the roles that are given us. And we begin to start assuming that our needs and the things that we are doing that are hurtful to the other person are justified because we're better. We're better than them, which is not true. So keep that in mind. The last two things I want to say then about marriage and putting marriage in perspective here is what a healthy marriage is and what an unhealthy marriage is. I actually don't like the term healthy and unhealthy because it has all kinds of other connotations, but I think it serves us well here. I really mean godly and ungodly. A marriage that does things God's way versus a marriage that is not done God's way. That's basically what it is. So here are the characteristics of a healthy marriage. Healthy, emotionally mature marriage consists of mutual. First of all, it is mutual. It is not just one person doing all of this, but it's two. I mean, you're familiar with the phrase, it takes two to tango. It really does. So it also takes two to tangle. But you are both doing this because you're agreeing to this. That's part of the covenant that you're working on this. So mutual love, trust, goodwill, intimacy, respect, forgiveness, mutual understanding, mutual kindness, mutual consideration, mutual openness and honesty, mutual appreciation, mutual cooperation. Does that sound good? Sound inviting? Do you like to work in a place where that's true all the time? That would be great. Like to live in a place that's like that all the time? It can be. or mostly. But it also has shared values and goals, shared spirituality, shared activities, shared commitment, shared responsibilities. And this is what Scripture calls building up one another. This is kind of the essence of this, is building up one another. We are in this with each other, for each other, to build each other up. Now, there's all kinds of positive emotions involved in this also, but emotions can get in the way of this. We'll talk about why in a minute. An unhealthy, emotionally immature marriage consists of mutual selfishness, mistrust, ill will, emotional distance, disrespect, hurt and blame, lack of understanding, a mistreatment of one another, a lack of openness, closeness. Closeness both emotionally and then not sharing just basic things about themselves and everyday life. A lack of gratitude, just to name a few, and instead of shared, differing values and goals, differing spirituality, differing activities, differing commitment, differing levels of assuming responsibility. And this is what Scripture calls tearing one another down. And there's all kinds of negative emotions involved in this. These things are laden with negative emotions. Now, how would you like to work in a place like this? How would you like to work in a place like this? I can't imagine that anybody would knowingly want to do that, because this tears people down. This is oppressive. This beats people down. In this, people don't listen to you. In that environment, you're an irritation to other people's goals. You watch other people get hurt and nothing is made right about that. There's favoritism that is shown. There's a lot of arguing going on and a lot of fighting. There's game playing going on. People building alliances and coalitions against others. There's a lot of gossip and whispering going on about what so-and-so is doing, and there's a hierarchy and people take sides and all kinds of things going on. How would you like to work in a place like that? Some of you are thinking, I do. You know what that does? That creates an environment where you can't trust people and where there's not going to be goodwill. You know that. And when that happens, you're very careful about what you do. You're very careful about what people know. You're very careful about what you share, because it's not safe, because you're going to be hurt. How would you like to live in a place like this? How would you like for your home to be this way? No one knowingly enters into a home to experience these things. And they don't just happen. A healthy marriage doesn't just happen. And an unhealthy marriage doesn't just happen. It happens over time. And it depends on how you start off and what you keep doing. Now, our marriage did not start. Our marriage started off this way. We were both quite young. I was just shy of 19. Tina was 19, and I already mentioned that I didn't have an understanding that I was to meet her needs. In fact, it's even worse than that. I believed that the entire purpose of the marriage was to meet my needs and to have things my way. And I had well-developed strategies going in on how to make sure that was done. One of those, my temper, I would quickly raise my voice and yell and say things to her. And then if I just had enough, because it just escalates, I get enough, then I would walk out and slam the door and be gone for a while. and knowingly thinking, well, that will show her. I won. That will show her. And then I would start calming down emotionally, and I would feel bad about what I did. And then I would come back, and I really didn't make it right. I didn't know how to make it right. We just kind of, okay, everything's better now. All right. And so then we move on. Well, over time, that began to really erode any kind of trust that she had in me. And it finally came to a head at about 5 years when she had had enough and began becoming more verbal about that. And God was doing some things in me, God was doing some things in her, and we were around some people at that time who really loved and cared about us. And here's the kicker. I was actually a youth pastor while all that was going on. I was even considered a spiritual giant, whatever that was. I was told that. Randy Paul was there when my senior class at California Baptist College got together and bought my class ring for me and threw me a party, including seniors that were graduating. They threw a party for me to say thank you. And Tina was incredibly unhappy in our marriage. And I remember, do you remember that party? I don't know if you were there. You might have been one of the ones that helped throw me into the pool. That's why I'm wanting to know. You do remember that, so you were there. Okay. But I remember thinking in that moment, during that party, man, if they only knew. If they only knew. I was a hypocrite. And by God's grace, and I really thank God for this, someone was able to talk to me about that, and I decided that needed to change. And I humbled myself, asked Tina for forgiveness, committed to change. And things began to turn around. Now, it took a while, took a very good while, but over the years, God really did this in our marriage. And this is more the norm. Not perfect at all, not at all, not by a long stretch, because I'm still in the marriage. But it's mostly like that. And there's a lot of things that we have been able to experience just because of the decades of doing things God's way. I still have a temper. I try to restrict it to the freeway. But God does deal with me on that. I want to ask you to do something right now that might be a little bit difficult for you before we take a break. May take an early break here, but I want you to take just a couple of minutes here and look at those two lists of healthy and unhealthy. And you don't need to write anything down so that others can see it. That's what I'm thinking, but you can if you want to. Where do you think you land on that healthy, unhealthy? Where do you think you're at right now? Or you can think about it this way. What would you like to see on the healthy list? What would you like to see more of? So just take a little bit of time right now and think about that. So my goal today is to show you some things that Tina and I learned over the years that helped us move in this direction here toward a healthy marriage. Towards a marriage that we enjoy and that hopefully is a blessing to others. And it's not struggle-free at all. Not at all. Actually, if we stop doing the things that create this, we start moving in the other direction. So we want to keep working on that. Thad, I'm going to go ahead and take a break now. It's a little bit early, but that's okay. We might make that time up.
Hello. Hello. We got about 43 seconds and counting down until we get started. So go ahead, come on back in, and Nathan will get us going.
Understanding emotions. So for the first time in our marriage, Tina and I live in a neighborhood with an HOA. Any questions? And it's a great neighborhood. It's actually a really good HOA. They're, as HOAs go, there's a lot of horror stories that some of you have with HOAs. I have joked in the past that I think the Antichrist is going to be either someone working for Caltrans because of the power they have to tear things up, which is usually my route, or an HOA president. I don't know, one of the two. So that tells you how I feel about HOAs. But that feeling, that attitude, that perspective predisposes me towards all kinds of things, like getting letters from the HOA. And when we bought this house almost 5 years ago, bought it new, so we actually bought dirt, and then we watched it being built. The builders were responsible for doing the front yard, doing the front stuff, which in our neighborhood is bushes and stuff like that. No grass. So they put these bushes in, but our front is on a slope, and long story short, they put in a terrible, terrible irrigation system, and they didn't fill it in right, so that the dirt kind of caved in, and it created poor drainage. And when it would rain, or even the sprinklers, it would create a lake. And we started getting dinged for this. Later, you got a lake in your front lawn, okay? But we didn't do that. So it was under warranty, so we called the builder. The builder comes, and so they redo it. And it didn't work. It wasn't good. Meantime, it's killing all the plants. Just kind of kills them, And then we call the builders again, and under warranty, they come back and they redo it. This time, they actually put a new drain in, and they cut a second hole out to the sidewalk so that it can drain. So we got our own little drain, okay? Or our own little hole in the sidewalk that goes to our front lawn. But the irrigation system was terrible. Within, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, something like that, the thing breaks and it's shooting water up all over the place, so I have to go repair it, splice it, all that stuff. This has been an ongoing thing, and the plants just keep dying. And so HOA says, basically, it's a long letter that we get that's very, very formal, and the way that it's written, you think that it's saying that they're going to show up at your door with the police tomorrow if you don't get this fixed. I mean, that's the feeling that you have. Or at the very least, you guys are terrible neighbors. You're embarrassing everybody here. Please fix this. And they never say what's wrong. They just say you're not in compliance with, this 50-page whatever, the way things need to look. You guys are tracking with this right now, right? So this has been going on for 4.5 years. It's one thing after another. So what we've been doing, so we finally hired somebody to take care of it. He comes in and he makes it look really great. But that doesn't last long. All of a sudden, it doesn't look good again. I know I'm taking a long time to say what I'm about to say, but it all came to a head. And each time we think it's going to be better, HOA looks great. We throw in some rose bushes, which don't produce any roses, but they hardly do. Anyway, but they okay, it looks great. Yeah, it's good. And then within a few months, it doesn't look great anymore. And we hate it. We have hated the way it looked. Okay? But it means to make it look the way it needs to look means we're going to have to put out a lot of money. And money that we didn't want to put out. So we're just trying to pacify the HOA. So this is the relationship we have with HOA. We're trying to pacify them. In the meantime, we feel like criminals. We really do. We feel like, oh my gosh, SWAT team's going to show up at our house. And I'm describing our emotions here. So we get a letter last fall, and we try to take care of it. And the lady comes and looks at it and says, oh, yeah, you'll be okay. Well, she leaves the next week. She's gone. And they don't transfer information. They do not do that with the next HOA person that comes in. They came in and she writes another letter. And okay, if you don't do this, now it's a threatening letter. If you don't do this, we will revoke your privileges in using the pool. You're telling me I can't use the pool until I get my yard fixed. Now I'm ticked. Who in the world do they think they are? I own this house. Are you kidding me? Come down here and say that. Now in the meantime, there's nobody representing HOA at the clubhouse. Nobody's there because they're now in Riverside, and there's no representative. And we email and we phone call, and there's no response, which I understand because I have students who feel that way. But they don't respond. There's no response until we get another letter, which we do. So last week we finally get a letter, and now there's a hearing that has been scheduled for next Wednesday. There's a hearing. A hearing. The Supreme Court is going to be there. I don't have time for this. I literally do not have time for this. I don't have time to track them down. I don't have time to. And in the meantime, we want what they want. And I'm thinking, could you just come over and talk to us face to face? So Tina, I very much appreciate her doing this. She took it up, and she didn't get Italian with them, which is great. Thank you for that. You guys know what that means. But she finally found out that they were going to be there yesterday morning in the clubhouse. A representative was going to be there. But Wednesday, she had tried to call them all day. She emailed, no responses whatsoever. I'm driving home from school, and she's telling me what's going on, what she did, and I am just ramping it up. I am getting, which is not good when you're driving. And I look down there, and I'm doing like 95. Because I'm just, and now I am angry. Now my son-in-law, Tim, back there also works right around the hall from me. And so he got it that day. I went in and I just told him everything that was going on. And then the more I talked about it, the more I got ramped up. So long story short, actually I've said, that's the second time I've said that. It could be longer. Tina finally goes and talks to them. Two young women, and they were as sweet as they could be. And they were as understanding as they could be. And they said, oh, now, in the meantime, we contact a guy who is a landscape guy, did Randy and Cindy's lawn, and it looks beautiful. They look beautiful. They're 3 houses down for us, and they're just gorgeous. And we want ours to look like that. So we got this guy, and he came and gave us a quote, told us what he wants to do and all that. So we wrote that up, and Tina emailed that to them. But she was just talking to them about, here are our plans. First of all, she said, we really want what you guys want. We want to do this. And they said to her, really, we just want to know what your plan is. That's it. That's it. This all could have been taken care of months ago, years ago, actually, if they just talked to us face to face. But as soon as I heard that yesterday, I went from here down to here. But the reason why I'm telling you that story is not because of HOA. It's because of how emotions work. Because I learned something about myself that I already knew, but I was just reminded. I made all kinds of assumptions. One, I was very predisposed to get angry. I was already, because I was expecting it, because I don't like HOAs. And I knew it. I knew they were going to stick it to us. But see, they weren't sticking it to us. They weren't. Not at all. And the people that were writing the letter were just doing their job. But direct communication is a whole lot more important. But I made all kinds of assumptions. And one part of that was, part of my experience is, and I'm assuming that some of you do this, I had about 100 conversations with those people in my head. And I don't know if you do that, but the more conversations you have with that, playing both sides, the angrier you get, the more worked up you get, because I'm anticipating. I'm really letting you guys into me right now. He needs counseling. No. But I was really confronted with my own inability or unwillingness or whatever it was to not master my emotions in the midst of that. Because I made all kinds of assumptions that weren't true or not true. And the same thing happens in marriage. So as I talk about understanding emotions, I want you to keep this in mind, and I'll come back to it. Emotions are deceptive. They're very deceptive. While I tell you something, they can't be completely trusted. Once you become aware that you have a certain feeling, one of the things you need to ask yourself is why? Why is it there? Why do I feel this way? What purpose does it serve? Because it serves a purpose. Our emotions are meant to inform us, but they are not meant to rule us. Very important to understand this. Our emotions always serve a particular purpose. Like, for example, kind of like an analogy would be the warning lights on a car dashboard. If you ignore those, if you ignore them, doesn't make them go away. Doesn't make that warning light go away. And often ignoring our feelings only makes the problem worse. So they're telling us something. They're just not necessarily telling us what we think they are. So, for example, when we refuse to admit to ourselves that we're angry or depressed, jealous or sad, shamed or afraid, we can't take the next step of deciding what, if anything, we want to do about those emotions. The emotions don't tell us what to do. And if we don't decide what to do with our emotions will rule us, sometimes in the most hurtful and inappropriate ways. So they can't be completely trusted. And they cloud our judgment. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but they cloud our judgment. In psychology, we refer to this as irrational thinking or irrational thoughts, where we start having this conversation with ourselves like I did about the HOA and the motives behind the HOA, attributing all kinds of motives, and then making an argument against them that they have not made against me because I'm making assumptions. And I am really grateful. Tina did such a fantastic job of managing her emotions, but what she did beforehand was master those emotions that she was having. Because before that, we were feeding off of each other. And I don't know what happened to her in the meantime, but if I'd have been the one to go in there, I already rehearsed the conversation. I was already defensive. I was all ready to let them have it, to give them what for. Tina did the opposite. And had she had done what I was thinking of doing, would have turned out okay, but she would have done some damage relationally. So I'm really glad that she did that. They seem like they reflect reality. That's part of the problem. They really do, no pun intended, but they feel real. And that's because we're experiencing something. Something is actually happening. But the emotion themselves do not reflect reality. They are a response to reality, a reflection, or a reaction to reality, but they are not reality. I want you to pay attention. You can't do it today, but I want you to pay attention or maybe think about how many times you start a statement with, well, I just feel like. Show of hands. You guys do that? Who does that? Really, I'm honestly asking you. You do that. I just feel like. So tell me, what is it? Why do you do that? That's rhetorical. You don't have to answer that. Why do you do that? Why do you say, I just feel like? You say that sometimes meaning this is true. This is true. Well, I just feel like you're an idiot. Or I just feel like you're against me. Or I just feel like you don't care about what I think. Or I just feel like whatever. That's not a feeling. That is not a feeling. That's not an emotion. That's a statement. That's a conclusion about reality. And it's because we're feeling something that we say that, and we automatically conclude it's real. I felt like the HOA was out to get us. That's the way I felt. But that's not a feeling. That's an assumption. That's a belief. That's a thought that I just rehearsed over and over. And based on that assumption, assuming that's true, then this is my response to that. Emotionally, my emotional response. So the problem is emotional reactivity. And now we're going to start getting into the fun stuff here. Not really fun, but what I mean is this is the meat of what we're talking about here. Understanding how emotions work. Now, believe it or not, this is going to sound odd to you. I'm assuming it is anyway. Psychology has little understanding of emotions. Let's let that sink in a little bit. We're not sure what they are. We're not sure why they are. We're not sure always how to manage them. But we talk a lot about them. And we ask the question, well, how do you feel? And quite often, that's what is presented to counselors first. I feel emotions. I'm depressed. I'm sad. I'm angry. I'm anxious. I'm experiencing these things. But there are very few, maybe 2 theories on emotions. That should surprise you. For all the emphasis in psychology on emotions and all the importance that's put on them. So, I tell you that to say that emotions, even understanding emotions, can be really confusing. What I'm going to give to you here is my understanding of how emotions happen. It's a theory. I think it's an accurate theory. Of course, I think it's accurate because it's mine. But it comes from decades of studying and helping people and thinking about this myself and looking at Scripture. So here's how I think emotions work. There is an external event that occurs, that happens. A behavioral name for this is a stimulus. Stimulus is something that elicits a reaction. So there's all kinds of stimuli going on right now around you. Some you're aware of, some you're not. Some you're reacting to, some you're not. But there's an event. There's something happening that you're aware of, that you respond to. Relationally, those are words, emotions, gestures, attitude, facial expression, voice intonation, circumstances. Those are things that we're receiving. We are aware of and recognizing and experiencing. So they're coming at us. There's an event. And we don't think about that event. We don't necessarily think about it. And there's all of these can be in combination. So this is the communication I was talking about earlier when in the introduction, talking about the thousands of exchanges that we have throughout the day with people, but with our spouse in relationship. We just have all kinds of exchanges. And then we evaluate that event. Now, evaluating means we interpret it. We give it meaning. It is a perception of reality. We come to a conclusion about what that is. Now, that can be something that's hidden, like motive. So we evaluate motive based on all of these things that we're seeing. That tone of voice. I know Tina and I make comments like that pretty frequently. I'll say something in a certain way, and she responds to it, and she's responding to my tone. I'm not aware of my tone. Sometimes she's right about that, and sometimes she's not. But there's a tone, a certain tone I use. Or she'll use a certain tone. She'll respond in a certain way. She'll use certain words. And I evaluate it immediately. I come to a conclusion. She ain't happy. Or she wants me to do something. Or something, whatever it is. But I don't consciously think about that. I just kind of react. But the evaluation has already taken place. That's where the emotion comes from. It comes out of that evaluation. Now, there are some psychological theories that are close to this, but the idea is that what I experience almost instantaneously in response to the event is the emotion, not the evaluation. It's the emotion that I experience. Now, you can also draw another arrow, which is not on there and it's not on here, from emotion to evaluation, because it's really a circular thing, because that emotion then becomes an event that informs me again, and you can just draw circle after circle after circle there because it's a cycle. that reinforces that evaluation. And then I interpret everything that is done after that according to that evaluation. And my emotion confirms the evaluation. See there? That's what's happening. But I didn't want to convolute it. But that's what happens. Are you guys tracking what I just said? Does that make sense? And then I react. But I react based on my emotion, not based on the reality, not based on what's happening. I come to a conclusion and I react with angry words. I'm giving some negatives here. Angry words, a dirty look, a bad attitude, yelling, crying, withdrawal, arguing, demanding, a raised voice, and any number of thousands of things. Now, that reaction also informs my evaluation. So this is just a vicious cycle. Now, all this happens in seconds. Happens in seconds. And we're just talking about one person. We're not even talking about an exchange yet. Now, if this keeps happening over and over and over again, if it is repeated, then what is created is emotional buttons. Emotional buttons that are attached to that external event, that tone of voice, those words that are said. And over time, the evaluation goes away. The evaluation goes away, and I'm not thinking anymore about, I'm not evaluating that external event anymore. It's an automatic reaction. I just automatically react or emote based on what the association or attachment or conditioning I have to that. Irrationality and reactivity then become a pattern, and the emotions become further validation of perceived reality. So now, this is a habit or a pattern. Now, I want to stop here just for a little bit and make sure that you understand what I'm talking about. So, what questions do you have about this? Or does this make sense to you? Are you tracking it? Do you think you understand this? Do you have any questions about this tape? I think at some point we stop evaluating it. Now, we stop evaluating it because we already know what it means. In other words, another way to put it is we get attached to, it always means that. That's what it is. So the evaluation just kind of becomes superfluous. And then we're just reacting to it. And once that happens, that could then take us back to this here. It's not what I want. This here, where now that's informing the evaluation. So this is really patterns and habits and how they form. Now I can see this in me. Very, very definitely. I joke a lot about driving the freeway, but that's a really good place where this happens. Where I have an automatic reaction to somebody cutting me off or somebody just slowing down on the freeway. When there's plenty of room ahead of them, they're in the fast lane, and for some reason they're just doing, 70 miles an hour. And so sometimes it is that. Sometimes I think they're slow. Oh, they're actually doing the speed limit. That's what they're doing. But anyway, I have an automatic reaction to it. I don't even think about it. I just react because I know what it means. It means that they don't care about anybody but them, and they certainly don't care about me, and they don't know the law. They don't know anything else, and they just need to to pull over. And I used to do this. I don't do this anymore, but people do it to me, just coming up on their bumper. You don't want to honk. You come up on their bumper. And what does that mean? You know what that means. Get out of my lane. Means all kinds of things. So that's a little bit what I'm talking about. Other questions? Yeah.
Going back to looking at the evaluation, is the evaluation and the emotion, are they connected, or should we not be evaluating but taking it to, I need more information? Or whatever?
Yeah, so the evaluation is where all kinds of assumptions happen. It's where we blow past it. So we come to well, there's two things. So mechanically, what is happening is that our emotions are coming out of the evaluation. So the emotions are in response to that. And then we react based on the emotion, not just the evaluation, but the emotion. It's an emotional reaction. And then we're doing things now that are driven emotionally, not rationally. That's another way you can think about it. It's irrationally. So that's the mechanics. But the other part of it would be the reality. So the reality is, I don't have enough information. I didn't have enough information from HOA to come to the conclusions that I came to and to react the way that I did. And it's driven by emotion, not driven by reality and being informed. So do you understand those distinctions? The mechanics of it. What I'm saying here is this is how they operate. And then the danger in that, this is why you can't trust your emotions. Because your emotions are not reflecting reality. They're reflecting some understanding you have about that reality. So what we're going to talk about when we talk about mastering your emotions is circumventing this process, or using this process to check your emotions and to master them or change them, but not be ruled by them, particularly in the midst of conflict.
That feels like the work environment, the way I respond at work, but then at home, I'm supposed to have some kind of emotion. But at work, I evaluate it with more information before I come to a conclusion.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys heard Derek, but he said that it's different for him in his work environment, meaning you have an easier time mastering your emotions.
Right, and getting more information.
Getting more information and giving the benefit and doubt and all those things than you do at home. And that's probably true about most everybody here. And that's because actually one of the things that shows us is that we can really control them. So the same process is still at work. Yeah, Carl.
You mentioned that the emotion also informs the evaluation.
Yes. Yes.
Say the same on the other end, the reaction reinforces or informs the emotion.
It does. So let me get a little bit of a laser here. So yeah, this informs the emotion and the evaluation. Yeah. And it does it it reinforces it because it proves, because now it feels real. It feels like I'm right. And quite often, particularly people who are good at making arguments, who are more intellectual and more thinkers, they're able to make these emotions sound very rational. And if they're relating to somebody who's not that way, then they can't keep up with them. In other words, if you're relating to someone who's like that, they're very quick and they can make they're actually reacting emotionally, but they're making it sound rational. But actually, there's a lot of emotions going on. And that's what's driving their reaction. I can be that way, but I can also just react emotionally. And there's no way to make it rational. Tony? That's what this is. That's exactly what I mean by this. So it's automatic. You're reacting. So I'm pointing to that, and I have a pointer. So the evaluation is no longer done, and so on the previous one before, you see how the arrow's going this way because you're evaluating the event, and then the emotion comes out of that. In this one, you're just reacting emotionally. So it goes this way, and it becomes a button that pushes it. So that pushes it, and then you react. So there's no thought at all given to that right there. There's no evaluation. Now that makes it really difficult when you have patterns in your marriage over time. It makes it really difficult for someone to change. Because they may do something or say something, and you react immediately as if they're doing what you thought they did, what they were doing before, but they're not. Like a bad habit, yes. Or 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. So they're trying to change, and then they're changing, and they're not. And then one time they do what they used to do. The emotional button is pushed, and then kind of go backwards. Now, there's a lot of implications for this. One of those is things need to be slowed down. The more that is happening in your lives, the busier you are, the less energy you have, the more tired you are, the less thought you're giving, the more emotional you are, the more difficult it is to slow all of this down. And then it becomes an emotionally reactive environment. When is our next break? For some reason, I'm not seeing it. 3:20, thank you. Good. So, other questions about this? Yeah, Jeff. I think that 2 things. That's a great question. So the question is, what about replaying past events and hurts and things like that? That all becomes, I think, part of the evaluation. Because one of the things that we do over time with memory and whatnot is we also begin to build, if we're talking about negative emotions, building a case against the other. It creates expectations. That goes back to that first thing that I was talking about, where we bring expectations into the marriage, but we actually don't bring it into the marriage. We bring it into incidences. We bring it into these exchanges that we have over time that then create grooves or ruts in the relationship. It's part of the habit that we form. So I had a habit of just reacting to Tina in anger. And even now, when I begin to raise my voice, she doesn't always say this, but I know that she's reacting to that because there's a history there. I'm pushing an emotional button, unintentionally or sometimes intentionally. Did I answer your question? So it's part of this, and then it becomes. I think it just then makes its way into this here, where you don't even think about it anymore. It becomes automatic. Now, one of the things that I want you to see here is that there is hope for change. There's a tremendous amount of hope for change in this, because we can control this process. What makes it very difficult is the repetition over time, and it becomes habit. And then those habits reinforce beliefs that we have about the other and about our marriage, and it begins to wear us down over time. And again, we get busy with life every day. We get in habits and ruts, and we don't take time to sit down and talk all of this out. And what happens is people start having conflicts, and they try to work it out themselves, and they don't succeed. They try to work through things, or they just kind of set it aside, and it just stays in the closet for a while, and it festers. And they get along, they do what they need to do, and things are going well, and then something brings it out of the closet. And then same thing happens, and then it just keeps growing over time. This emotional monster starts to grow. And then over time, dissatisfaction then sets in, because you start evaluating the entire relationship, not just this particular event or things, but you start evaluating the entire relationship negatively. And that results in dissatisfaction, unhappiness, at some point, hopelessness, sense of hopelessness, and then despair. And then people just start to resign, emotionally, just kind of resign. Because what happens in this entire process is people begin to lose energy and lose the motivation to keep after it. These are great questions. So what other questions you have? It's important you understand this, because this is kind of the basis for some other things I'm going to be telling you about mastering your emotions. The Bible assumes we can master our emotions. Ephesians 4:26-27. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. Which is a fantastic piece of advice. So thinking about the other things that we have talked about, just the way emotions work, what this is saying is it assumes that we can actually master our anger in the midst of an argument or in a timely manner. So what that means is that not letting the sun go down means that we let the sun inform us how long we let this go. And what that does over time, and it keeps us from establishing habits. Okay, it happened. We let the sun go down on our anger, which means we didn't resolve that, which means we're still angry the next day. And then it's not resolved and the next day. And then something else happens and we get angry and it's not resolved. And then it just piles on over time. And that results in some discouragement over time and difficulty in managing and motivation. So what I'm wanting you to see is that this over time impacts the entire relationship. And the same thing that we do with individuals, we begin to do with the relationship. We start expecting certain things in the relationship or not expecting things. And I have heard this from couple after couple after couple for decades in talking to them. I don't mean everyone, certain ones. I've heard this. Where people who start off in their marriage fully committed to staying in that marriage for the rest of their lives, till death do they part. And they want the marriage to work. They're wholly committed to the marriage. Decades later, saying, I'm done. I am done. And what I'm saying to you is, it's because of thousands of things like this over time that just erodes the mutual trust and goodwill. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over many nights. Not by letting the sun go down on the anger. Now, I'm talking about anger right now, but that's true about all kinds of things because other emotions. There's about 6 basic emotions that psychologists have identified, but there are nuances to those. Anywhere from 6 to 85 emotions, but there's basic emotions, and Scripture talks about those basic ones. And sadness and anger and anxiety, those that we have been dealing with in the Message series, are among the ones that Scripture really speaks to the most. And those are the ones that come into the marriage more. And there's other things beyond that that are connected to those somehow. So with that understanding of emotional reactivity and how emotions work, now I want to move into mastering emotions in marriage. And that starts with understanding needs. One of the purposes of marriage, companionship, is to meet each other's needs. Eckerich, a Christian psychologist, has written about this. He wrote a book called Love and Respect. We've actually used that book here in some small groups before. And he just takes the passage of Scripture that talks about love and respect, and that is in Ephesians. However, let each of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. And the idea, along with all kinds of other scriptures about how men and women are wired, is that men and women have, in the marital relationship, have 2 basic needs. He needs to feel and experience respect, and she needs to experience love. Now, they both need to experience love, and they both need to experience respect. But there is a difference in the degree of that and the significance of each of those with men and women. And so he talks about the cycle that men and women get into. There's a positive cycle and a negative cycle. The positive cycle is the rewards cycle, the rewarded cycle. His love, or regardless of her respect, his love for her, regardless of her respect for him, and her respect, regardless of his love for her. So they both choose. He chooses to love her, she chooses to respect. And that creates this cycle that he doesn't call this, but in marriage counseling, we call this a spin in. And a spin in is where the 2 people are spinning, they're doing this, and they move closer to each other because of that. That draws them closer together. They spin in. The other cycle is the opposite. He calls it the crazy cycle. Without love, she reacts without respect, he reacts. And they reinforce each other. And that's the crazy cycle, and that's the spin out. So he moves further away, she moves further away. And there's the spin out. That is another way of talking about and thinking about the way the emotions work. So that evaluation, and then the emotions that come out of that, and then the reaction. So this is a different way to think about that based on the need for love and respect. And what is key to this, to mastering this, one of the keys is communication, because communication impacts this dynamic more than anything else. So, I want you to watch this video. Enjoy this video. Talks about communication.
You have to learn how to communicate. That's the word, communication. You have to learn how your spouse communicates. That takes time. Men and women communicate differently. It took me 2 years of marriage to figure out my wife will never tell me to do anything around our home. If Tammy wants me to do something, she'll ask me a question. It's from the question that I got to stand there and figure out what it is she wants me to do. Simple example, say I leave a pair of my underwear in the middle of the bedroom floor, which frosts my wife. That's her word when she's angry. That just frosts me, Jeffrey. If I'm not frosting her, I'm driving her up a wall. That's another one. Kids would come in. Where's Mom? She's up the wall with frostbite. That's all I know. You won't believe what put her there, man. It was that pair of underwear in the middle of the bedroom floor. You're looking at the most powerful piece of cotton on planet Earth. So I leave my underwear in the middle of the room. Would she come to me and say to me, pick those up? That's 3 words. Hey, pick those up. 3 words! Would she say them? No, because that would be simple, direct, and right to the point. And at that moment, we would be communicating at the highest human level. The way God, the Creator, intended it, through language. She looks at me, looks at my underwear, and then asks, are those yours? I sure hope they are, otherwise I got a few questions of my own. What do you want? That's the only question a man has for his wife. What do you want? Quit talking in code and tell me what you want.
Obviously, that resonates with you guys. So, communication actually occurs a certain way. And I want to talk about the mechanics of communication and then how emotions work into that, because that's where conflict occurs. That's where emotions get involved. And there is certainly a difference between men and women in the way that we do that. But he's talking about missing each other in the way that we communicate and the need to be clear. Communication is really about mutual understanding. If there's not mutual understanding, in other words, you're thinking the same thing. What you say to her and what you mean is taken exactly how you mean it. Then there's communication. Or what she means in her communication to me is taken exactly how she means it. That's communication. That's mutual understanding. And it's really difficult to do. It is. And one of the reasons is because of emotions and because of that whole dynamic that I talked about before of evaluation. So one of the things that happens emotionally and emotional irrationality is we stop hearing. We stop listening to and stop hearing and stop doing what we need to do in order to find out what was exactly meant and intended. And that just ramps up the emotions. This is exactly what I did with the HOA. I carried both sides of the conversation. Well, I didn't, because there was only one side. That was their their letters to us. And very formal. It's extremely impersonal. I get that. They have to do that. It's a kind of a legal thing that they have to do. But my reaction to that was making all kinds of assumptions. Think about this, ladies. If I were to say to Tina, "Oh, Tina, you look nice today." What is my intent? Yeah, it's a compliment. It is a compliment. How is she likely to take it? Yeah. Yeah. And it could be that I just stumbled over the word today somehow and I don't know. Oh, you look nice today. And it kind of hits her that way. This doesn't happen, by the way. I'm using one that, yeah. Other things happen. But so just a little thing like that. Now, think about this in terms of how emotions work. The evaluation, she evaluates. She has an emotional reaction to that based on the evaluation. She believes it's true, which means she believes that I just insulted her. And she reacts accordingly. And then I hear it. Wait a minute. I meant that. Now I am insulted. Maybe feel disrespected. She made an assumption. Now I'm defensive and I'm reacting to her. Then she reacts to that because she defends because now she's proving. I have proof. I was there. I heard you say it this way. I don't know if you were there or not, but I was there and I heard it. Have you guys had conversations like this? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, we're the only ones. But we're defending our irrationality, both of our irrationality. We're defending it, and now we're not. Over time, if we keep doing this, we're not even defending. We're not even talking about how she looks. Now we're talking about what happened in the argument. No, that's not what I said. Yes, you did. I heard you say that. I didn't say that. It's just how it goes. And what we're doing is violating all kinds of principles of communication, mutual understanding. So I want to talk about the mechanics of this. Now, they're both in an exchange. There's a sender and receiver. And the response to the message that is sent automatically switches the roles. So the response is sender to receiver. I'm not going to do that here, but that's what happens. I just want you to understand the mechanics of this. So there is a sender of a message. She has an intended message in her mind. What she means. She has an intention. And she communicates that through. And then there's an intended, or there's an actual impact. And it would be great if the intended meaning and the actual impact were exactly the same. But here's what's important here. Again, we're back to the evaluation thing, is that he does not respond to the intended meaning. He only responds to the impact. That's his response. He responds to the impact. And just think about everything that we've already talked about, how emotions work, and the evaluation and the emotional reaction. That's what's going on here. So he's evaluating, he's hearing it that way, he's interpreting, and she has a filter in the communication of her message. So there's a filter. It could be her voice intonation, it could be body language, it could be other things that or words that she chooses to use or whatever else, but there's a filter because she's thinking, I am as clear as I could possibly be. And there's no way in the world that he could possibly think any differently than what I intend. There's no way. Because I'm absolutely clear about this. Now, I'm saying she, but you can also say he. So this is where I'm not picking on the wife here. So she communicates through words and ways, and then these things here: words, emotion, gestures, attitude, facial expression, voice, intonation, circumstances, and all kinds of other things. So what she says and what she does, she communicates that message. And then it lands on him a certain way. And he also has an interpretive filter. This is where all that comes in. So this is where the way emotions work, the evaluation, interpretive filter, which includes all of these things here, and then also emotional buttons from the past. So Jeff, this is to your question, just some things from the past that come in, an expectation. But it could also include just your level of energy, just your mood can change the way you hear what you hear and the exchange in the moment. So this morning, I'm moving pretty quickly to get things ready to leave this morning. And I realize that. I recognize that in myself, that there is a potential here for some negative exchange to take place because I'm already irritated. Not irritated with Tina. I'm not, irritation is not the right word. I'm anxious. There's an anxiety that I have here to make sure that I get myself ready and do things. Tina woke up with a headache this morning, an earache. She needed to calm down and take some aspirin and all that stuff. Sorry, Tina, that I didn't ask you if I could share that, but it's gone now, thankfully. And so I'm also thinking about her. She might not even be able to come. This doesn't go away. Thinking all of these things. And I'm telling myself, take a deep breath. Do not react to anything. Now, I did inside, but I didn't actually react. You didn't know that, Tina, but I was. So that's this interpretive filter. That's the mood I'm in. That predisposes me to react or to hear her in a certain way. And the Bible says that this comes from who we are in our hearts. So that's one of the things that impacts us. Our words and ways eventually come out what's really true about us. So there's a disposition that we have. There are things, there are attitudes and perspectives and beliefs that we have and values. And those, we're not going to take time to look at that. But over time, if there's a problem that is happening, then that's one of the things that needs to be looked at. Now, what happens here is if there is an emotional button that is pushed in the receiver, it hasn't responded yet, there's an emotional button. What that does is create an emotional fog. He is now in emotional fog, which means that he cannot think clearly. He's already thinking down a certain, already taken a different road here. And so he's going to misunderstand. He's going to react emotionally, and he might even attack, accuse, and blame. And now, when the exchange occurs, his exchange in response to this, then the same thing is likely to happen with her. And then it just gets foggier and foggier and foggier, more misunderstanding, more emotional reactivity, and then attacking, accusing, and blaming, and then eventually hurt. We eventually say things that we regret saying. We do things that we regret doing. This is the anatomy of a conflict. And here's one of the things one of the reasons why I share this with you. I'll share this and then we'll take a break. What we need to understand is the responsibility that each of us have as the sender and the receiver. Both the sender and the receiver have a mutual responsibility in making sure that we communicate, that we have mutual understanding. So for the sender, The sender needs to be careful with the words that are chosen. Person's responsible for the words they choose to communicate. The receiver is not responsible for that. But what we often do is hold the person responsible, hold our spouse responsible for understanding what we said, for knowing exactly what we mean when we choose that word. But actually, we're the ones responsible for that. Expectations. Whatever expectations that I bring into the communication, how it's going to be understood or responded, I'm responsible for. I'm responsible to make sure that I have her attention. Make sure I have her attention. Make sure that I am being clear. It usually takes more than one communication to be clear. And what happens is we're saying things back and forth like this quickly, and things aren't clear. So, and then meaning, or patience, sorry. I'm responsible for being patient. Here's the patience. Here's what usually happens, what typically happens. I say something, responded a certain way. Clearly it wasn't understood. So I'm patient enough to give her one more chance. Because of how magnanimous I am. So take a deep breath and I try it again. Doesn't work. Now I'm irritated. All right. Let me try it again. First grader could have got this. I don't know why you're not. But I'll try it again. I said, then what's going to happen? Then we're going to go into the emotional fog. And we're going to get defensive. But actually, you need to just go ahead and especially when things are anxious anyway because of everything that you're doing and what needs to happen, you have to ramp up the patience. So count on, and you may not have time for this, but count on at least 2 times and maybe 3 times before it's communicated clearly. Or make sure that you're clear in the first place. This is exactly what I want. This is what I need. Or, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. What is it that you need to know to understand what I'm saying? Meaning, we're responsible for the meaning, and we're responsible for the nonverbal cues, like the voice intonation and all of that. To be honest with you, that's the one I have the toughest time with. Because I'm not aware of the tone that I'm using until Tina reacts a certain way. And then she'll say, well, you said it with that tone. And what tone? There's no tone. There was no tone there. What are you talking about? No, so not only did she not understand or not only was I not clear in what I said, now I have to defend the way I said it. And then the receiver is responsible for actually making sure that they have your attention. So the classic, watching TV, Tina starts talking to me, and then 2 days later, did you know that remember we're doing such and such? Well, when did you tell me that? Okay. So Tina and I, we actually have learned to practice this, to stop and say, I'm sorry, you did not have my attention. So now, please say that again. Please say that again. Now, another one is, you're talking, you're both doing something. You're not sitting down and talking, you're doing other things. They're talking, you're talking, things are going on. There's a little pause in the talking, and then you leave the room, and then they start talking again, as if you're there. And then you're held responsible for everything that was said. Make sure that even things like, do you need me to stay here and finish and listen? I mean, I don't want to get crazy about this, but you know what I'm talking about. This is the way it happens. Actually, I'm responsible for listening. to actually paying attention and listening. I'm responsible for my interpretation, not her. I am responsible for my response. She's not responsible for that. I'm responsible to validate that I understood what she's saying, to get validation. And I'm responsible for showing her respect and for any nonverbal cues. And this results in mutual understanding, mutual respect, and mutual trust. Does this make sense? This happens. So, when you're talking about a conversation, it's this. And then if emotions are involved in that, it gets difficult. We're going to break down the mechanics of this a little bit more after the break. Dad?
All right. Thank you, Nathan. Really appreciate that. Very helpful stuff. So we will take a break. So we'll be back here at 3:30. Get some more snacks. Go for a little walk if you need to. Whatever you need to. But we'll get going again at 3:30.
Another way to look at communication is also to understand. In fact, the whole reason why I'm talking about communication is because of emotional intimacy. And for this, I'm using the analogy of castles, because people are like castles in this way. And it's just a different way to talk about what I've already talked about, these cycles that I've mentioned. Love and respect cycle, the communication cycle, the emotional reactivity cycle. Another way to look at that, but more specifically about how it impacts us emotionally. Because the emotional intimacy is one of the ways that both husband and wife gauge their satisfaction or happiness within the marriage. Wives are usually more in touch with that than husbands are. They tend to have their pulse on the emotional atmosphere, or even really the marital satisfaction. But both are emotional. And if he feels disrespected, she doesn't feel loved. They experience that in different ways. And they communicate that in different ways. But this moves us into how conflict impacts emotional intimacy, which is what I want to end with, to talk about how to manage your emotions or master your emotions in the midst of conflict. So everything we've been talking about is kind of pointing in that direction. It's a more narrow focus of mastering your emotions, but there are principles there that will apply to any, even outside of conflict. So people are like castles castles are defensive. That's what they are, defensive. That's the purpose of them. And they have walls that allow people in or keep people out. And the only entrance is the drawbridge. So you see the drawbridge, that with the drawbridge, in fact, that's what makes a castle vulnerable, is the drawbridge. And the idea is that when we feel attacked, the drawbridge goes up. We take a step back when we feel attacked. That's the attack right there. There's an attack. Whew. I need sound, but there's an attack or a perceived attack, an intended attack or a perceived attack. So now we're breaking it down again in communication, but the drawbridge goes up, starts to go up, which means start to step back, to pull back, getting defensive. That's what we're doing. So when the emotional reactivity happens, the drawbridge comes up. In other words, we're not going to just sit there and allow someone to just beat us up. Oh, no. Give me more. I want more of that. Criticize me more. Please, condemn me more. Be more sarcastic. Speaking of sarcasm. Bring it on. I didn't get enough of that today. So bring it on. No, we automatically get defensive. We close up. And so what we tend to do is react to that. We shut down emotionally, and then we counterattack. And the other drawbridge goes up. We counterattack. And then we both start attacking. It escalates, and then emotional intimacy is damaged, as well as mutual trust and goodwill is eroded. Now, if the conflict is not cleared up, if there's not an understanding, if it's not cleared up in the right way, then the drawbridge stays up. And it's never let down. And so there's a defensive mode that they both get into, and they just exist. Now this happens a lot of time. What'll happen? One of the ways that they draw the bridge up and straight arm. I'm mixing metaphors there, but that's what's happening. Distancing, emotional distancing, is by triangling in an activity or people or even a cause. So if you've been in previous seminars that I've done, you have seen the normal level of satisfaction that happens across the stage of marriage. The normal one is to take a dip, usually when kids come around. But the most common one is for it to never go back up. And this is one of the reasons why. Because things are not cleared up. The marriage stops being attended to, and they start to give up. They start to withdraw and pull away from each other and just stay. And so their emotional need is met elsewhere. Not in the same way, not in a satisfactory way, but in a way that keeps them at least hanging in there until they can't take any more. And then they make some kind of drastic move, or they never make a move, and it just stays that way for a long time. So the problem is escalating arguments that then don't get resolved, don't get dealt with in the right way. So this is anatomy of an argument and how it escalates. So this is one of the things that happens. So you have H1, 2, and 3, W1, 2, and 3 there. And what that stands for, husband and wife. And that stands for a particular exchange. So this is the way it works. He says something. Now, I'm just going to take something arbitrary like, you look nice today. Okay? And she takes that a different way. She takes that as an offense, as an insult. The reaction starts, the emotional reaction, and so she responds to that. But now it's escalating. Now, one of the things that I want you to see here, and you can even draw this, is that with each one, they move further apart, and the drawbridge is going up. So they're moving further apart with each one of these exchanges. So that's the spin out that we talked about. So she responds negatively to that, and then he reacts to that and gets defensive about what he said. He didn't mean that. She completely misunderstood it. Maybe he says something insulting to her in the midst of that, or he has that particular tone, and so she reacts to that. They're not talking anymore about how she looks at all. Now they're just reacting, emotionally reacting. And so she says something else, and then he reacts to that. And this can keep going until they just stop. And they go to their corners until they calm down. And that could take a long time. That could take days, depending on who they are, where they're at. And then he feels disrespected and she feels unloved. And the reason why he feels disrespected is because he is. The reason why she feels unloved is because she is. In other words, neither one of them are acting in a loving and respectful way. They're now defensive. They're now in that defensive mode. And then what eventually happens, what's happening is then there's an increasing self-focus. So which each one of those, they stop doing what they need to do in order to stop this escalating. And they're doing what escalates it more. And one of the things is they stop thinking about the other person. The other person now becomes their enemy. They're now against me. So instead of working with and for each other, they're working against each other now. And they are their own worst enemies in that moment. The trust starts to weaken. Now, if we're just talking about one argument here, you keep this going, more and more arguments, and then the trust eventually erodes, completely erodes, and the drawbridge stays up. Personal attacks increase, defensiveness rules, and intimacy is damaged. Now, I'm going to show you something now that's not in your handout. I thought of this after I printed this out or submitted it, but I realized this would be really helpful. And you can draw this or you can just write it out. But what happens is if conflicts don't get resolved over time, then the heat increases. The heat increases. And this is how it increases. We talk about 4 stages. There are 4 stages of conflict here. 4 stages or 4 levels of conflicted marriages that get increasingly worse. The first level is a new conflict that has occurred. It's more recent. It's issue-focused problems. So they're actually talking about an issue. There's a conflict. So my wife and I have had conflicts over things like what certain expectations we have of each other, expectations to do this or that, or certain things that need to be done, or there could have potentially been a conflict, for example, over who relates to the HOA. Who's going to do that? And Tina graciously agreed to do that, which I'm very glad for, because I would be in jail right now. But but I was glad for that. But in the past, there's been tension over things like that. Who's going to do that? But that's just an issue-focused thing. It's not personal. It's just an issue, a problem. But you can't seem to resolve or solve it on your own. So that's where it becomes a level 1 conflict. So there's arguments about issues, but now we can't seem to get this thing resolved. And we talk about it, but we don't get anywhere. In other words, we need help. We need help. That's a level 1 conflicted marriage. So we're not talking about where we clear things up. We clear things up. Now, I think every marriage needs help at some time. In fact, we need help without even asking for it. We get help from each other here just by talking about and encouraging each other to do things God's way. That's help. We get help from messages. We get help from Scripture. We get corrected by Scripture. So we're getting help. So when I say getting help, I don't mean professional counseling. I don't mean, meeting with somebody and you're real. It's just reaching out and saying, hey, can you help us with this? there's a lot of hope at level 1. There's a tremendous amount of hope for getting out of a rut or not making it worse by getting help. But a lot of times, couples don't ask for help at this point. They just keep trying to make it work. Level 2 is turbulent household. This is where, over time, it's not just the recent issue focus things, but because of that dynamic that I've talked about already, there's hurt and there's blame and there's sin. And it becomes more serious. And people within the household are beginning to experience it. Well-entrenched, frequent disagreements that are more in front of people, and personal attacking. You always, well, you never. So character is questioned. Character. Now that may start in level 1, but it's no longer issue focused. It's now character focused. You can't be trusted. I can't trust you. Or some other issue that's more personal. People, and that doesn't change. They're not working through that on their own. It's possible to do that, but it's not necessarily happening. They need help. They need help identifying what that is and changing it. Now, if that doesn't happen, then it moves into a level 3 or alarm. And that is weary despair. And what's interesting about this is the calm before the storm. This is where they get so tired that they just back away. And people can stay there for a long time at level 3. This is where the triangling really comes in, and they need it. This is a depressed household. Hope is beginning to submerge that there's going to be any change. There's less open conflict, so it can fool people. Even it can feel that way to them. It's mistaken for peace, but one spouse might actually be considering a divorce, something drastic. According to some research, this couple, without help, has a 50-50 chance of making it. 50-50 chance. They have a chance, even with help, of not making it if they don't make certain changes. But they're very conflicted now. And they're starting to lose hope. It's probably gone on for a long time. And it's interesting, you're familiar with the 7-year itch. That probably occurs with the level 2. But one of the years I actually thought about writing a book by this title is 17 years. 17 years. With a particular kind of marriage, that's where they are fully committed to not getting divorced. And then about 17 years, I started talking with couples 20 or more years ago, and I started hearing the same story. 17 years they've been married. And usually one of the spouses, I'm done. They start to give up. But that started 2 or 3 years earlier, and now they don't have any more motivation to do anything about it. And then level 4 is dead-end conflict. One spouse may be engaged, may have engaged a lawyer. Resolution is less than 25% if they don't get help. Now, I saw a couple in professional counseling a few years ago, and she had already decided that she wants out of the marriage. She filed for divorce. They were in the process of getting divorced. She actually bought a house and moved out, living in the house. That's a level 4. And she was there to inform me. So in front of him, she's done. And I asked them to tell me what's happening, and they told me, and I said, I don't have anything to lose here because you guys, you're getting divorced. So I'm just going to tell you, I think that there's hope here. I can really help you. I don't think that this is unresolvable at all. But, I know that you've already filed for divorce, you're in the middle of a divorce, you've moved out, you bought a house. And they left, and I thought, that's the last I'm going to see of them. Well, they came in she called me during the week and said, I thought about what you said. I'd like to give it a shot. I said, okay. Long story short, several months later, they were still in counseling, and she had moved back in. She'd sold the house and moved back in, but they forgot to stop the divorce. So they came in. They came in one time, and they were laughing. I said, what's going on here? I said, we're divorced. What? Forgot to stop it. I said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, there's no problem. Our anniversary is next week. We're going to go to Hawaii and get remarried on our anniversary just because it's easier. That's a true story, by the way. So even at level 4, there's hope. There's some hope. Actually, God can change anybody. So now that brings us to what this entire seminar is about. With all that in mind, so I want you to keep everything in mind we've talked about. And I've been repeating the same thing in different ways, so you get the gist of this. Things don't happen overnight. It's death by 1,000 cuts, as they say. So the first thing that you do, and this is what my wife and I have practiced for a very long time, for decades now, in different ways. We're not always successful at this. That's not what I'm saying. But we understand this process and what needs to happen. The first thing is to call a truce. This is a great scripture. Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam. So drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. In other words, when you realize you're in the middle of an argument and you're not getting anywhere and you're now going back and forth, stop. Stop. Call a truce. My wife and I do that different ways. We have certain statements that we make. One of those is taking a time out. We just okay, time out here. Another thing that we say is, you know what? I am not against you. We just make that statement. Whether we feel it or not, you know what? I'm not against you. And what that does is it kind of stops us. If you have played the fool and exalted yourself, or if you have planned evil, clap your hand over your mouth. It's about as practical as you can get. And if that doesn't work, duct tape it. For as churning the milk produces butter, and as twisting the nose produces blood, so stirring up anger produces strife. In other words, shut up. Stop talking. In the middle of an argument, that's really what I'm saying. Because it has to stop. You have to stop. Call a truce. Because the truth is, this is a partnership, a companionship, a stewardship. It's bigger than either one of you. For the sake of that, and for the sake of clarity and other things, stop. Now, that sounds really difficult, but one of the things that you need to do that helps us to avoid these things, avoid hot buttons and dirty fighting. You know what it takes, for example, to fight dirty. You start attacking personally and questioning character and motives and all kinds of things. That's dirty. And you know what hot buttons are. You know what their emotional buttons are. So stop that. So one of the things that I had to do, a habit, because I have a black belt in sarcasm, is just, if they gave those, I would. Because I was raised with that. That's my first response quite often. And it's hard not to respond that way in anger. It's hard not to. Even if it's not in anger, it's just not the best way to respond to anything. And so someone helped me, a dear brother in Christ, helped me by giving me a way to think about this. He said, I noticed that you are sarcastic to Tina, and I think that really hurts her. And I said, no, she understands. I'm just kidding. That's not. And he said, well, let me give you a way to think about this. Every time you do that, it's like taking a bullwhip and just snapping her with it. That's how it lands. And I thought, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. We're in Texas. It's just, there's something, he's just exaggerating. I said, well, thank you for that advice. Well, I went and asked Tina. I told her about that, and she said, that's exactly how it feels. And I really appreciated that imagery because I don't want to do that. Then I started looking at scripture that talks about the tongue. And that's exactly the way the Bible describes it. It's very powerful. Now, one of the biggest needs that we have in marriage, besides intimacy, is what's called affectance. Affectance is where communication and power comes in, and influence. Affectance is the need to know that we matter, that we make a difference, that when we say something, it matters to the other person, that we have influence in this, that we're considered. And I use sarcasm as a way to just put her down, just shut her down, put her in her place, if you will. And after a while, she was just wounded. So I repented of that. It's not an easy habit to break. And it's still my second language, I think. Just automatically. So it's something that I have to work at. So, call a truce. It's the first thing that you do. In other words, you have to stop. Even if it's just stepping back and just agreeing, we need to stop. Somebody just saying that, we need to stop. We're not getting anywhere. We're working against each other. It's getting worse. It's going to get worse. It needs to stop. Because until that does, you're not able to do anything else. In other words, don't make it worse. Don't add fuel to the fire. The fire's burning in a kitchen. You don't add fuel to it and then expect everything to be okay. Same thing in a relationship. Any questions about this? This is very important. Just make sure that I'm being clear. I can hear all of the yes buts in your head. You don't know what that is? It's very clear. It's right there. Wow. Thank you for catching that. I am not a detailed person, but I am OCD enough to want to stop this entire presentation and fix that thing. Okay. I won't be able to sleep tonight, is what I think. I don't catch it. But when it's pointed out to me, everything is not right with the world right now. So I don't care what you guys get out of this from here on out. That thing has to change, okay? It's not okay. This video, it's a fun video, introduces the next idea. The next thing you have to do. So you have to stop. You have to shut up. And then you have to listen.
Men, how many times has this happened to you?
To me. You know, our babies sleep really, really good.
Or this.
Make sure Timmy wears the blue shirt. If he doesn't.
Or even this.
And for my birthday, which is next month, I'd really like some of this.
Do you have trouble listening or retaining information from your wife? You could be suffering from spousal selective listening, or SSL. With SSL, valuable input is intercepted or scrambled before it reaches the critical learning center of the man brain. Virtually anything can trigger it, like sports, food, even shiny objects with buttons. Fortunately, there is help with Heritol. Containing a rare root with an exotic name, Heritol helps men focus and listen to valuable female input, even pick up on those subtle hints.
These are exactly the earrings I wanted. How did you know?
Thanks, Heritol. Now I can hear it all.
Heritol has not been tested or approved by any regulatory agency. Side effects with Heritol include minor to severe headaches and spontaneous combustion. Use caution when using Heritol near mothers-in-law, as you may hear hurtful comments that would have previously been ignored. Heritol is an enhancement drug. Do not use around children or clusters of talkative old blue-haired women. If focused listening lasts longer than 4 hours, consult your doctor immediately before your wife assumes this is a new standard in your relationship. Men with wives who are nursing or pregnant should not take this product. Heritol, the preferred selection or solution for selective hearing.
So the second thing is be quick to listen. Be quick to listen. Scripture says this. You know this, my beloved brothers and sisters, now everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. I was reading this one time and I thought, okay, this is like a race. This is a race. It's a race between hearing, speaking, and getting angry. It's a race. So when you hear something, when there's an event that is happening, and you are interpreting that, and then you're getting emotional, and then you're reacting to it, then here's the natural reflexes in the race. I need a starting gun. I wish I had a starting gun. So it's saying, this is the normal reaction. And the winner is anger. So somebody who's getting quick to anger. I know this may not help you, but things like this help me. They keep it. Honestly, I actually think about this when I'm not on the freeway. Slow to anger. So in other words, your first response needs to be slow to anger and quick to listen. So what needs to happen is that listening needs to win the race. Listening needs to win the race. So, in other words, the first thing is shut up. It's the first thing. Stop. Just stop. Everything needs to stop. Call a timeout. Just stop. Like you're in a boxing ring and you're fighting and the bell rings. Everybody goes to their corners. Stop. What we tend to do is try to resolve the conflict without stopping it. So sometimes that happens because one person just stops talking, goes away, goes over here, but they're mad. But you don't have an agreement here to actually stop this. Let's take a time out, let's stop. So you do that. But then you listen. You cannot listen if you're arguing. You can't listen if you're thinking about what you need and what you're going to say. Then you can't listen. That's not listening. Listening requires you to shut up. It requires you to put your hand over your mouth, literally, which means you're not yes-butting. Yes, what did? Shut up. And that can be hard. And then listen. Seek to listen. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. So, when there are many words, it's very true. When there are many words, transgression and offense are unavoidable. So what comes after many words? Eventually, if you keep talking, you will eventually offend. You will eventually transgress. It's unavoidable. Keep talking. Just keep talking. Just keep on. Yes, but, yeah, but me, but, hurt, offense. It's going to happen. It's a sure thing. It will happen. But he who controls his lips and keeps thoughtful silence is wise. It's wise. So listening. Stop and listen. Questions about this? Do you hear me? That's a joke. I'm being adamant about this because what I'm saying is true. and necessary and is exactly what needs to be done. You have to stop and you have to listen. Now, sometimes you do those at the same time, stop and listen. But you really have to listen. The kind of listening that we're talking about is an active listening. It's a listening, okay, I'm thinking about myself now. I need to stop thinking about myself, and I need to start thinking about her. I need to find out here and really listen to what she is saying to me. What is she thinking? What is she feeling? It doesn't matter if I agree with it. It doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't matter if it is against me. It's what she's thinking and feeling. It actually is. And I need to understand that. I have to listen to it. We're not going to get anywhere if I don't do that. I have another video that introduces the next thing. This is from what's the sitcom? Say it again. Big Bang Theory. She knows that because she was in here when I was playing it before, and I couldn't remember. And I asked her, "What is this?" And she told me. So it's this Big Bang Theory. Obviously, I never watched it, but this is a great scene.
First, there was PlayStation, aka PS1. Then there's PS2, PS3, and now PS4. And that makes sense. You'd think after Xbox, there'd be Xbox 2. But no. Next came Xbox 360. And now, after 360, comes Xbox One. Why one? Maybe that's how many seconds of thought they put into naming it.
Can you get the butter, please?
You know, however, with the Xbox One, I can control my entire entertainment system using voice commands. Up until now, I've had to use Leonard.
Then get the other one. Pass the butter.
Hang on. I don't feel like you're taking this dilemma seriously.
Fine, Sheldon. You have my undivided attention.
Okay, now, the PS4 is more angular and sleek looking.
No way!
It's true. But the larger size of the Xbox One may keep it from overheating.
Well, you wouldn't want your gaming system to overheat?
No, see, well, you absolutely would not. And furthermore, the Xbox One now comes with a Kinect included.
Included?
Yes. Not sold separately. Although the PS4 uses cool new GDDR5 RAM, while the Xbox One is still using the conventional DDR3 memory.
Why would they still be using DDR3? Are they nuts?
See, that's what I thought. But then they go and throw in an ES RAM buffer.
Oh, wait a second. Who's they?
The Xbox.
You're kidding!
No, I am not. And this ES RAM buffer should totally bridge the 100 gigabit per second bandwidth gap between the two RAM types.
This is a nightmare. How will you ever make a decision?
See, I don't know. What should I do?
Please pass the butter!
Step 1 is to shut up. Step 2 is to listen. Step 3 is to seek to understand. Seek to understand. You need to avoid angry. Hot buttons. Okay. This is a great verse. A fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in his own opinion. That just fuels arguments. That's what's happening when you're not listening. That's what's happening when you're yes-butting. That's what's happening when you're going back and forth and the emotions take over because those emotional buttons are pushed. And now you're reacting emotionally. And what's amazing to me, this even surprises me about myself, but I know that it's true, is how rational I can think I'm sounding when I am overwhelmed emotionally. And I call it passion rather than emotions. And I think I'm being rational. I've got an argument here. And my argument makes sense. I have proof. This, and this, and this, and then, well, she does too. She's got all kinds of proof. And now we're not listening. We're not seeking to understand each other. And actually, what's happening is, because you've heard the same thing in a previous verse, if you have played the fool. So now I'm being a fool because I only care about my own opinion. I don't care about understanding. I take no pleasure in understanding. Why? Because I could come out on the wrong end of this. So I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear it. And we get very, very stubborn. Now, we can also do this in a calm way. I'm talking about anger a lot. But we can do this in a calm way. Person could just be passively aggressive, and do the same thing. Just not listen. Another verse here is to husbands. And I use the Amplified Version here. The Amplified Version, which is put together by the same people who do the American Standard Bible, the Lockman Foundation, what they have done is it was actually a woman who wrote the first one. She did this, and then the Lockman Foundation took it on and did another version of it. They include the Old Testament. She did it with the New Testament. What it is it takes every nuance of the original language that is used and just puts it in there. So you really get the idea of what's being communicated here. So in the same way, you husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way. Let that sink in a little bit. In an understanding way. First of all, wives are not commanded to do this with husbands. They're not commanded to live with their husbands in an understanding way. Now, they need to. They need to be understanding. But the command is given to men. Now, I think one of the reasons for that is because women are more naturally wired to seek to understand and empathize and all of those things. And men aren't naturally wired that way in the same way, so they need to be commanded to do that. With great gentleness and tact, and with intelligent regard for the marriage relationship. That's what the Greek means there. I'm going to read that again because you guys, husbands, you do well to memorize this. With great gentleness and tact, and with an intelligent regard for the marriage relationship. So with great gentleness, that's about the other. That's about stopping and thinking about her. And it's not just, this is telling exactly how to live with her in an understanding way. Another translation says, with consideration, we consider her. But we do that with gentleness and tact. I am often neither gentle nor tactful. And I know Tina immediately reacts to that. That pushes her button. Understandably so, it does. But with an intelligent regard for marriage relationship, hopefully you have a little bit more intelligence about the marriage relationship after this seminar. Just how marriages work and what it is for. So thinking about intelligently that you're in a marriage. And that you're actually working against your marriage right now by not being considerate or understanding. You're now working against it. You might as well be on the outside of it, just shooting it, because that's what's happening. As with someone physically weaker, since she is a woman, it also has the idea that she is more easily hurt. Show her honor and respect as a fellow heir of the grace of life so that your prayers will not be hindered or ineffective. God takes it personally, the way we treat our wives. He takes it so personally. This is so important to him because you are mistreating his daughter. That's what he's saying. So Tina's not just my wife. First and foremost, she's my sister in Christ. She will be my sister for eternity. She will only be my wife here on earth. And if I mistreat her, God takes that personally. Actually says, you want to keep, and it's not even just mistreating her. It's just not considering her. It's not living with her in an understanding way. It's refusing to understand her and then turning around and saying, God, would you understand me? God, would you do for me? God, would you do this or do this? And God is saying, hey, stop. Stop mistreating my daughter. Pay attention to my daughter. Take care of her. Love her. Be considerate toward her. And then I will consider what you're asking. Otherwise, good luck with that. This is serious stuff. That's why I'm saying it as emphatically as I am. So, again, call a truce. Stop talking. Stop. Seek to listen. Start listening. And then seek to understand. All of those things are really related to each other. So it's all about stop thinking about me and mine and begin thinking about her. And because that's what's going on. And then, this is hard. Admit to any wrong. Admit to any wrong. Thought about getting a clip for this, but there are so many comedians who say the same thing in their routine about marriage. They tell the men, just learn 3 words. I was wrong. I was wrong. I mean, there are just too many clips to show for that. But there's something to that. There really is something to that. It's humility. A man who refuses to admit his mistakes can never be successful. But if he confesses and forsakes them, he gets another chance. It's true. Part of this is our thinking. It's calming down, admitting we're wrong, seeking to understand while reining in our irrational thoughts. So going back to what I talked about before, how emotions work, and it's the evaluative process that's involved in that. And Derek was talking about that earlier and asking about that. This is where that comes in now, where we are now willing to consider, okay, what went wrong? What am I thinking about here? What is it that I need? What does she need? How did I misunderstand this? What is the right way to think about this? What is reality here? And that is what Scripture calls taking thoughts captive. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. So it's taking our personal thoughts into obedience to Christ. At this point, it's subjecting ourselves to the truth. What is the truth here? What are God's ways here? What is being called for in this whole argument that we're having right now? Both of us answer to God. And God hasn't been part of this argument. We're actually working against each other rather than with and for each other. And we're also working against the marriage that God put together. So what does God say about marriage? What does he say about what we need to do? And what does he say about the situation and the thing that we're talking about and arguing about? Why do I believe that I have a right to feel the way I'm feeling? Why do I think she's wrong in feeling what she's feeling? The emotions tell us something. There's something going on. And if it's an emotion that is consistent over time and keeps occurring, keeps happening, and I keep shutting it down in her, it's not going to go away. What is it saying? What's the purpose of that? What is she unhappy about? What is she frustrated with? And needing to look at that. And maybe we need to bring somebody else in on it to help us think this through, because we're in a rut. Can't seem to figure this out on our own. Don't make assumptions. This is some hints on taking thoughts captive. Prayer is a part of all of this, by the way. I didn't even include it in here, but prayer is a part of all of this. So bringing God into it at this point, stopping. So stop fighting each other. Listen. Seek to understand. And then start asking yourselves, where does the truth come into all of this? Invite God into it. Say a silent prayer to yourself. Pray together. But God needs to be invited into this. And part of that is a humility. God, give me humility to listen and understand my wife here. And to be willing to humble myself and admit that I have been blowing it. One of the greatest fears that guys have is that they're blowing it. They have a hard time admitting it, but it's hard for them to hear it. You don't know what you don't know. You do not know what you don't know. So don't act like you know what you don't know. I did that with HOA. I didn't know what I didn't know. Now I know what I didn't know. You know? And I like what I know now. It's amazing how the truth immediately calmed both Tina and I. And then, here's the thing. My first thought was, oh man, was I wrong? I was so wrong. They don't know that I was wrong. But man, my heart was exposed, though, to myself. Give the benefit of the doubt. That's part of taking thoughts captive. This is one of the things that my wife and I practice, is try to anyway, give each other the benefit of the doubt. Tina's really good at that. I'm not so good at that. She's really good at that, and I appreciate it, giving me the benefit of the doubt. And that stops things. That stops the matter. That stops the dam breaching. Giving the benefit of the doubt. In other words, another way to think of it is, she can't possibly mean what I think she means here. Because that's not consistent with her character or who she is or our marriage or anything. There's got to be something else going on. So giving her the benefit of the doubt. HOA can't possibly mean what they say they mean. This can't possibly mean that. Or until I know differently, I'm not going to think that way. Don't attribute motives without understanding. One of the things that happens is we start believing a certain motive. We convince ourselves it's true. And then when they tell us that it's not true, we think they're lying. Or they're just unaware. We know them better than they do. That has to be your motive. Or you wouldn't have said it that way. Or you wouldn't have said those words. That has to be your motive. So part of taking thoughts captive is, I don't know what the motive is. Until I know what the motive is. I don't know what it is. And then rehearse and affirm the truth. Rehearse and affirm the truth. So that's about receiving. So again, you stop. You listen. You seek to understand. You're open to your own wrong. And now it comes what could be confrontational. Now it's about allowing each other to be completely truthful. Completely truthful, no matter how it feels. Truthful yet kind. Because we don't want to be dishonest. We don't shut down. If there's something we need to talk about, we need to talk about it. An honest answer turns away wrath. We need to be honest. Do not lie to each other, since you've taken off your old self and its practices and put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge of the image of its creator. We're not to lie to each other. Gentle answer turns away wrath. Pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. That's the gentleness, the kindness with each other. And then give and receive forgiveness. So as we are communicating emotion, I went ahead, forget it. Forget what I just said. Back up. I need to talk about this. Communicating emotions, that's part of the truth. That's part of truthing with each other. Communicating truth. One, admit you have feelings, and then allow the other person to have those feelings without making a comment of whether or not they are warranted, accurate, or whatever. You need to understand, don't present feelings as facts in communicating your feelings. Take responsibility for your feelings. You make me so angry. Well, no, you got angry. I got angry in response to that, but you didn't make me angry. Now, you may have pushed buttons, but I got angry. I chose to get angry. Be open to your feelings being inaccurate and admitting that. Now, in the course of all of that, in the course of admitting you're wrong, in the course of opening up and communicating truth and having an open and honest conversation here with each other about all of that, things will come up that you need to ask forgiveness for. So give and receive it. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as Christ, God, forgave you. When we overlook an offense, man's wisdom gives him patience. It's to his glory to overlook an offense. Shows wisdom and glory. So we give and receive forgiveness. We talk about, that's one of the hard attitudes here. Actually, several hard attitudes are involved in all of this whole process. Being open and honest with each other. Looking out for the interest of the other. Here it is giving, clearing up relationships. That's giving and receiving forgiveness. Stating specifically what you did, confessing it, admitting it. I was wrong when I said this, or the way I said that, I was wrong. Will you forgive me? Will you forgive me? Now, that may take a little while. Sometimes Tina and I go through this process. We get to step 4, and we kind of separate a little bit, and then we come back and do 5. And then we come back and do 6. You know, I was really wrong this morning. What I said or what I did. And then the last one is build up one another. Let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, Scripture says. But only what is helpful for building others up according to the needs, their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. The Greek word unwholesome there means rotten. Like a rotten fruit or rotted meat. It stinks up the relationship. Stinks it up. Unwholesome words do. Rotten words. Words that put down. So this isn't in your handout, but there are 7 C's that are rotten. They are unwholesome. So don't do these things. It's the battle of the 7 C's. Never compare. Why can't you be more like, so-and-so's? Yeah, don't compare. Don't condemn. Which is basically a put down. Putting them down. Don't command. Commanding is demanding. Command. With no consideration whatsoever. Just command. Don't challenge. Challenge is more in an argumentative way, so don't be argumentative. Don't condescend. Sarcasm does that. Don't contradict. Nuh-uh, nuh-uh. You're not listening anymore. Help me understand why you think that way. And don't confuse the situation. Don't confuse. Don't say things that are confusing. Being inconsistent, all of that. Some of these things are strategies and habits. So don't do those. So what do? Only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So the last thing I want to talk about here, it's the last slide, then we'll have time for Q&A, is a build-up atmosphere. So one of the things that we're doing is, part of this is, as we are practicing these steps, this becomes a part of us. As we go through this, we're creating a build-up atmosphere. As this becomes an atmosphere or environment that we experience ourselves and that people who are part of our household experience, children and others, as they experience our marriage, it builds up. It builds them up individually, it builds the marriage up, and it builds individuals up who are in it. One, frequently talking. Talk frequently. Have conversations. Catch up on what's going on. Share your thoughts. It's just talking. It's conversation. What happens is we get really busy in life, and we're two ships passing in the night, but we're trying to get things done that need to be done, and we stop talking. We make all kinds of assumptions. We don't know what's going on, but talking. Frequent talking. Catch up daily. One of the things that I do, and I'm pretty consistent with this, I think, is I call Tina when I'm on the way home. And we just talk. We talk. It's a 20-minute drive. We talk. She catches me up on things. Sometimes I think, okay, she's done talking, so when I get home, we don't have to talk anymore. Actually, I just kind of primed the pump, but not true. But you know, there's catching up. I had no idea until somewhat recently, I think, how much that means to her, that I call her. I'm just calling to let her know I'm coming home. And then we start talking about things. So it was fun yesterday to have the different conversation that I had on Wednesday. Wednesday I'm all worked up because we haven't talked to HOA. Yesterday coming home last night, or when was it? Thursday night coming home, we're talking about what happened. And so that was a lot more fun. Strive to understand. You just make that a habit. Striving to understand. That just needs to be part of the culture. That's what we do here. We seek to understand. We work hard at trying to understand. Related to that is giving the benefit of the doubt. I already talked about that, but now I'm talking about it as part of the culture. We give the benefit of the doubt. We don't automatically assume the worst. Benefit of the doubt. And then active listening. Active listening is listening to understand. It's listening and then asking questions, but not asking questions like you saw in that video, faking it. They did what? Yeah. But really wanting to understand. Active listening. Positive responses. Give positive responses. I am basically an Eeyore. Melancholy. I can get really negative really fast. And I'm not even thinking about it. Just have it. I have to tell myself, you know what? Knock it off. Be positive. Stop whining. Just say something positive. Just be positive. That's actually a choice. And it makes a difference in the atmosphere. Assuming the best. Now that's related to giving the benefit of the doubt, but it's a little bit different. Assuming the best. Assume the best stuff. Assume they want the best. And then have State of the Union debriefings. State of the Marriage Union debriefings. Now, it helps if you have those debriefings after arguments. Not right after arguments, but at some point to come back together and say, and if you can't do this, then it's not resolved. But you come and you might need help. So come back together and say, what happened? What happened in that? Well, I was thinking this, and you were thinking this. I said this, and you're thinking, oh, and you learn from that. So debriefing. But also State of the Union debriefing is just coming together to talk about, are we really at a place that we want to be? Are things happening the way we want them to happen? Do things need to change? So State of the Union, instead of just settling into, well, it's just going to happen, what's going to happen. It's being intentional. My wife and I try to do this, certainly on anniversaries, but we do it other times also when we kind of get away and we can just talk about things. And it's where you talk about dreams, you talk about other things, and it's State of the Union. I think that this is necessary. I think it's really good. So this right here is taking everything that I've talked about and making it a habit and part of the culture of your marriage and your family.
All right, everybody, come back and grab a seat. So we're gonna move into some questions and answer time, and I will be going around with the microphone just so that everybody can hear your question, and we pick it up for the video recording as well. So if you have a question, I'll run the microphone over to you. But here we go.
If you don't have questions, I also like to hear how it's helpful. Yes, Carl. You used a tone there that I'm not sure.
Well, I had the question earlier, and then I just kept listening, and I thought I had the answer. But since we need somebody to get this party started, I'll go ahead and just redo it and make sure I got the right one, or I'll give you an opportunity.
Okay.
So, I underlined in my thing where it says, wife needs to be loved regardless of whether or not I'm getting respect, because that's the thing I've got to remember. And you'd used an example a couple of times on, you look nice today. Like, what do you mean by that? Do I look not nice other days? And how to respond to that. Fortunately, my wife doesn't pull that particular trick on me, but if it did, I can see my temptation is totally to check out right there, because I just attempted to show love, and she, in this example, effectively said, no, I don't believe you. I'm suspicious of your attempt, and you are not able to show me love right now. And I'm like, well, okay, clearly all the problem is on your end, and I'm checked out, and I give up. So could you model a way out of that so it doesn't go to the H1, W1, H2, W2 spiral there?
Would you like to be your wife in this modeling?
No, thank you.
So no, let's do that actually. So, because you just did it. You just did it.
All right.
So you look nice today.
Well, what do you mean by that? You don't like how I look other days?
You were...
Sorry.
No, so what's happening inside of me is, first of all, you know, there's not an emotional thing here, but there's probably emotions with that. So I'm going to react defensively. So
Okay.
instead of reacting defensively, I need to own, okay, she misheard me. She misunderstood that. So I want another attempt to clarify. And that attempt to clarify would be, I didn't say that right. I didn't really say that well. I didn't say that the way I really meant it, the way I intended it. And then restate it. That's...
Oh, all right. The one I came up with in my head was, I don't say that every day, and I should. So today, I'm saying... You look nice.
Okay, if that works for you.
I don't know. My wife doesn't pull that particular.
No, that's fine. But just, so does that help?
It
So
does,
what's happening is you're taking thoughts captive there, and you're rethinking about, okay, instead of getting defensive, being the castle, attacking back, and all of that, you don't attack back. And then you do what the opposite of attacking, and you seek to understand.
As I was working on a couple of attempts on that, listening to you, I was just reminded how hard it is for me to own that I did anything wrong or to apologize, because the enemy steps in and says, "Oh, that's right. You're always wrong, Carl. Remember that."
Yeah.
Okay. The advice that all the comedians
Yeah,
have, and
so
just
that's the
admit,
button.
"Oh, I was wrong. I'm sorry." It's like, I don't want to say that all the time. What if it's not true? She's wrong this time.
Yeah. So that's the button. That's that emotional button and the emotional reactivity now that's going on. And that may require doing a State of the Union debriefing and talking about when you're calm, when you guys are calm, not in the heat of the battle. When you're calm, talk about that pattern and make some kind of an agreement or commitment that you're going to do that something different together. Because it's not you. One of the mistakes that couples make is thinking that there's something clever they can do or say to make this go differently. But really, this is a dance. So one of the problems with that is advising a spouse, one spouse, to try this with him. And it didn't work. Well, because you're not both working on this together. So that's where people need help. So when you're calm, try working on it when you're calm. And if you can't get past it, then you might need some help. Because we're talking about a pattern here. Stay. Hello?
I don't have a question, but one of my top takeaways was one of the things that Carl mentioned was just the humility of admitting to wrong. And you had said that equals getting another chance. And I thought that was motivating because I want a second chance. And if I humble myself, then that's motivating to get another chance.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad
thank you
said
for that.
Yeah. If I remember right, that was actually in the scripture passage, right? Yeah. Am I right about that? I think, yeah. I'm going to go ahead and give God credit for that one then.
Could you possibly repeat something that you had said?
Sure.
When you were talking about the problem of emotional reactivity,
Uh-huh.
and then you went to the emotional buttons,
Mhm.
and you said that if this becomes habit and it doesn't get dealt with or change happens, then it starts with dissatisfaction, and then you went through, like it leads to, I think you said the list of what it will lead to without.
Uh-huh.
Could you repeat that? Yeah.
That's not in your handout?
No, right?
Not those words.
I don't think so.
Where's that at? What's that under?
When you were doing the cycle, and then it was external event to emotional buttons and then reaction.
Oh, so it's back here. Like right here? This?
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, Lindsay.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm not sure where you're talking about, so that's... No. That's... Anybody else know where she is? Conflict in marriage?
Right here. This one.
Oh, okay. I may have said it, and I don't have it written down. which means I don't know what I said. Getting back there. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, guys. So is it this one here? Is that it, Lindsay, what we're talking about? So ask your question again.
If it goes unchecked, if this cycle happens in your marriage, then eventually over time, what will happen is dissatisfaction, and then that leads to, and then you said several other things.
Yeah, hopelessness, discouragement, despair. Oh, I remember it now. Yeah. So despair, eventually despair. Dissatisfaction, disappointment, discouragement, despair. Because what happens is affectance. If you keep trying something that doesn't work, you keep trying and keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, and eventually you stop trying. And so you get discouraged, and despair involves helplessness and hopelessness and almost guaranteed depression, particularly with women. And also tremendous fear, because they're afraid of the D word, divorce, and just the idea that this isn't going to change, and I feel hopeless and helpless, and that leads to a depression. Understandably so. And particularly if the husband refuses to get any kind of help. If she's even tried to talk about this and confront and all of that. Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate the patience.
Understanding emotions. One of the points you made was emotions, especially negative ones, cloud our judgment of reality. What can we do to combat that?
First of all, don't automatically believe that your emotions are true, that they're accurately reflecting reality. So that needs to be checked out. So a lot of it's coming from assumptions that are being made. So some assumptions can be verified, and so you have to have a change of mind. But the other thing is a stance that you take. You take a defensive or selfish stance. So humility is in order. So to stop and realize I'm thinking about myself here. I'm not thinking about the other at all. And so I need to make that shift, and that calms you down. That you may still have the emotion, but you're not ruled by it. So the whole problem is you're obeying the emotion as if it's telling you to do something based in reality. So you're deciding not to obey the emotion. But to realize, so part of what I was doing generally is to say, realize you're in a fog here. You're overwhelmed by emotions. Do not make a decision. It's going to be rash. By the way, that's true even with positive emotions. I've gotten excited about something and committed money towards something and then realized, that was a bad move. It's called haste, but so even positive emotions can overwhelm you. So just stopping and stepping back and not making any emotions. The emotions don't do damage if we don't obey them. which is different than listening to them. Listening to them is trying to understand where they're coming from and what they're telling you and what the purpose is. Does that help? Okay.
I'm looking at the step 5, be truthful yet kind step that you talked about.
Yes.
And one thing I think that's challenging in this, and I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, this is where you try to open up and say, well, this is what I was thinking, this is what I was feeling, and be truthful about that. At the same time, I see this step as having some minefield there too.
Sure.
Because if you say, I was thinking this, that could trigger a button
Yes.
both ways.
Yes.
And then, so how do you approach this step in a way in conveying what you were thinking and being truthful so that you do it in that kind way? Do you see where I'm going with that?
I do.
Yeah.
You need to approach it the same way you approach everything else. So it is realizing that the triggers can happen even when you are at that point, like you just said. So something can be re-triggered or triggered again. You don't like what's being said. So when you get to that point, the idea is that you are both humbled enough by then, because you have confessed some things and you have come to understand that you're wrong. That's why admitting that you're wrong or where you went wrong or did wrong comes before that, so that you move now into the attitude, the mindset of really being able to understand and listen. So it's not that you do this step, then this step, then this step, then this step. You start this, and then those things all work together, and now they serve you in this step here. But you can also go back and stop listening. You can talk out of turn. You can do wrong again. And so if that happens, you recognize it's happened, and then you just go back through and do the same thing. I don't know a different answer than that, but that's what you have to do. So it's not linear, it's circular. But there are first things that are first things first. So you have to stop. Because neither one of you are going to humble yourself. So what you're doing is you're literally calling a truce. We watched, my wife, Tina and I were watching, what's that show? It's the Special Forces, where they have celebrities who are going through Special Forces training to see what they can take. It's really interesting. So the episode we watched yesterday, they were required, one of the special ops guys was patted down, and they had to attack him and as aggressively as they possibly could. And he doesn't fight back, but they have to do this, and they have to keep doing it. And then as soon as the other special ops guy says, stop, and they have to stop. And some of them had a hard time stopping because they're in this aggression. And when they stop, then he says, okay, calm down. Now you need to calm down. The whole purpose of it was to train them to stop right in the middle of their aggression and to calm down, which I thought was really fascinating. Some of them had a hard time doing that. Even the most passive of them had a hard time calming down. So that's kind of what you do. You're saying stop. You have to stop. If you don't do that, then it's hard to go through the rest of it. So you just go back and do that. Did I answer your question? Okay. Now, all this stuff can happen in seconds. Happens real quickly. Can escalate fast. But once you realize, okay, we're out of control here, we're actually hurting each other now, that's the signal to stop. Then you got to come back and make it right.
Well, thank you, Nathan. Let's give Nathan a hand. I want to encourage you all. There's a reflection question at the bottom of the last page that basically says, which one of these steps is the hardest for you? Circle that one and set out to work on it this week. If you need to talk to somebody in a group you're in, or somebody here at CIV, they'd be glad to pray for you. Or if you need to debrief more, they'd be glad to do that as well. I want to thank our events team who put this on. Tanisha Garcia leads that team. Nancy, quite the spread back there. Pretty awesome. Thank you. And then Tate Hoogstead set up and tore down too. I mean, isn't this cool? The two chocolates together. We got like the word of God is sweet to the soul. I mean, man, when I was in charge of this, we just threw candy on the table. So this is fun. This is a step up. So I'm really glad that you guys could come. Let's pray, and then we'll be dismissed. God, we thank you so much just for your guidance and your word, and that you do want our marriage relationships to be as you intended. I pray that you'd help us to put into practice what you've shown us each individually that we can do to make that relationship better. We ask for your help to do this. In Jesus' name. Amen. Have a good day.